All right. Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of The Binding Status. We are excited that you're joining us here before some folks in the U.S. who have a long weekend. We have an awesome guest on today, per usual, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we get started, I see a couple folks trickling in now. As you join, feel free to drop a note in the chat and let us know who you are, where you're joining from, if you have any questions or thoughts as we go through the show. If you don't know me, if you haven't watched before, my name is Dan. I am a maintainer on the Crossplane project. I work at Upbound, where the founders of Crossplane have started a company. And we have this show every 2 weeks, and we generally look at other CNCF projects, such as Falco, which we're going to look at today, and just kind of explore how they work together. Standardizing on the Kubernetes API opens up a lot of possibilities for projects to be able to interact together. And we're specifically excited today to see how Falco works and how Sysdig, the company behind it, enhances that experience. And we are joined today by Pop. If you haven't heard of him before, you probably are not on Twitter or in any cloud native communities because he is all over the place. He has a podcast called the POPCAST, where he has some awesome guests on today. He just released a new episode with the founders of HashiCorp. So go check that out. There's really a lot we could say in the introduction here, but I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to him to kind of introduce himself and talk about the things he works on, his background, and what he's up to these days.
First up, Dan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and thanks for allowing me to talk about Sysdig. Yeah, big fan of yours, you know that. And it goes beyond that. I love what you're doing, Crossplane. I got to play with Crossplane this week, and I was blown away. I think it's a fantastic tool. I mean, in terms of deployment, it's very simple using Kubernetes primitives to be able to deploy infrastructure, certain applications and services and what have you. I thought it was really freaking cool. We can't curse, right? So I'll say freaking. Anyway,
We've never tried, so maybe you can. I don't know.
I'll keep it PG.
All right.
So in terms of what I do for Sysdig, beyond the POPCAST, which is my own personal thing, and we'll talk about that, I guess, in a bit, but I am the chief field technologist for Sysdig, and what I do is kind of talk through with customers and prospects, not only our commercial tools, but talk about the basis of the tools. Which one of our tools is a CNCF incubator project called Falco, which is a behavioral rules language engine that pretty much allows you to secure your Kubernetes level infrastructure, even any cloud native level infrastructure. So that's kind of what we do. And today we're going to talk about it, use some practical examples, and then talk about how we've extended using that basis of Falco into our Sysdig Secure platform, Sysdig Secure DevOps platform, which also includes a level of monitoring as well. So that's kind of me. So that's the day job that pays for the bills, right? And then I have the POPCAST, which is, to me, it's been as much as I've been at Sysdig for 4 years, but in terms of it fulfilling a fulfillment aspect, the POPCAST has been phenomenal. We're at 22 episodes right now. We had Kelsey Hightower on. We've had the HashiCorp folks. That was our last one that we did. And what I want to do is, when I started, I was I wanted to have something where, you always hear about the code and these great things about okay, when they started Kubernetes was from the Borg. And then, I wanted to be able to connect this community with the people that are creating these things. Almost you remember Cribs or something on MTV? It was you got behind the code and you got to figure out, okay,
right.
And you get these really amazing revelations, a genius like Redbeard, right? I had Redbeard on, and if this dude, you hear stories about just how amazing this guy is. And when I had him on, he let it all out there. And I implore you all, just take a look. And you can follow us at Twitter. It's at PopcastPop. And again, what I want to do is connect you with the story and the people behind the code. That's all the purpose of it. It's not anything with Sysdig, and it's my own thing. I do it out of my basement on my, server rack over here and all that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I've definitely enjoyed listening to it. And one of the things that's really unique about kind of the cloud native community when you compare it to other open source communities of the past is how welcoming it is. And a lot of those folks, like those folks that you talk to on your podcast, they're just people just like everyone else, even though they've gained some form of notoriety for the awesome work that they've done. But I don't know. I think it's just really cool to hear them have real conversations with you. And I think you do a great job of kind of like bringing out like the right points, them talking about the motivation for what they do, how they view themselves as part of the community and that sort of thing. And those interviews usually are very wide ranging, which I love. So, you'll talk about things from, writing actual code and how something's implemented to like, what do you do in your free time? What are things you're interested in outside of this? So really wide ranging, and you really get, as you said, a full picture of who that person is rather than just the work they do. So I think you're doing a great job over there. And as you mentioned, all the links for that show and Sysdig and Falco and Crossplane and everything should be in the description below this video right now. So if you want to check those out, don't leave the stream, but you can save those for afterwards.
Smash that like and subscribe button.
Yeah.
Shout out Stephen Augustus. Shout out. By the way, it's not a good podcast unless, or excuse me, it's not a good stream unless you mention Stephen Augustus. So,
you got
shout out, brother.
He's probably doing something related to making this stream happen. So, you got to give him the shout out. Definitely want to give some folks shout outs in the chat right now. I see Jared's joining. Jared is always on. He's one of the founders of the Rook project, which is going to graduate from the CNCF soon. As well as Crossplane, which is now a sandbox project. He's joining from Belgium. He's usually in San Diego, so we're getting the international flavor this week. And we have Cedric joining, who says hello. I'm not sure where he's joining from, but excited to see you here. And anyone else who's on, I see we have some other viewers. Please feel free to drop comments as we go along. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the main part of our show here. So I'm going to go ahead and start off like we do every week, and I'm going to share my screen, and we can take a look at the Falco docs here. Let me get those pulled up. So we're going to look at Falco first, and I'm going to ask Pop a few questions about that. And then he's going to tell us about kind of the motivation behind the project and how it works. And then I'll kick it over to him to talk about Sysdig and the Sysdig agent and all that sort of thing and the different products they have that build on top of this. So, as you mentioned, Falco is a pretty mature project, right? It's in the incubating phase of the CNCF, which there isn't too many projects there. So it's definitely a vote of confidence for it. So when we open up the Falco docs here, the first things we see are these three kind of like major points here. I was wondering if you could just kind of give us a walkthrough of this access, assert, action kind of set of functionality that Falco provides.
Sure. And I think we'll demonstrate it as well. But I kind of want to talk about the origins of Falco. And basically, if you look at our founder is Loris DeGiovanni. If you're all familiar with like Wireshark or TCP dump, basically kernel-based instrumentation is a very unique instrumentation point where you're getting a ton of data that you can do some interesting things with. And so we started out with our Sysdig Capture, which is, a tool as well, which is for first open source foray. So any of the, our basis is based in open source as Falco is. And what you're doing is we're tapping into deep level kernel level tracing using like eBPF, ptrace, and those types of things to get introspection of what's going on for you to create this rule set. And this rule set is it's a very simple syntax. You have macros, and what have you. And what we do, which is very cool, as part of this project, and shout out to Leo, Lorenzo, and Chris Nova and that team in terms of just getting these things deployed, is we're actually creating kernel mods that are on the fly for all of the various. So when you deploy like the agent, or if you deploy Falco, you basically get this kernel mod that allows you to kind of tap into kernel functions to then stream that data and then output it to things, DIY, like where you can output it to gRPC, HTML, those types of things. And you have this rule set that you can extend as well. So people are constantly contributing. So there's another link we could send to you, but there's a securehub.dev where you can basically get even additional rules for like the rule sets. But again, it's all based on like a rules file. And in that rules file, you can basically define like what would happen, what the output would be. I'll give you the link. I have to look it up, but
cool. Yeah. No worries. Awesome. Yeah. So that's one of the great things about the project, I think, is this ability to extend it with these different rules. And one of the things I think is useful about Falco, and I've been doing some work kind of in this area as well with Kubernetes recently, is that, a lot of folks look at Kubernetes and they say, okay, we're completely extracting away kind of like the nodes and the machines behind the scenes. And we really don't have to worry about that. Well, every workload you run, every pod you schedule is running on a node somewhere in that Kubernetes cluster. And there's a layer there that's kind of controlling that interaction with the kubelet there. But a lot of folks just are kind of I don't want to say ignorant, but they're not aware. They're not they don't care as much about kind of that interaction with the node. And there's a lot of things that have been shown from folks like Liz Rice, Ian Coldwater, a few folks like that who show all the different exploits that can happen at the node level. And a lot of folks just don't have experience with working at that level. They don't have experience with the kernel. They don't have experience writing kernel modules or knowing what syscalls, a process is using. And Falco makes that a lot easier and allows you to have a sane set of defaults and extend that to your use cases. So what are some of the common things that you think Falco detects that folks have, common in their Kubernetes cluster that their workloads may be doing that you wouldn't consider secure or Falco wouldn't consider secure?
So, I mean, again, terminal shelling into a container, it's a prod. I mean, that's a key one. We always demonstrate that. And that's actually what we'll demonstrate today, but also writing to sensitive files. But again, I sent in the link if you want, it's the securehub.dev link. But basically, again, it's having the ability to we already give you a best practice rule set that you can enact and create custom rules on top of it. But like the ones that we see are things like that, or like mining exploits, right? Where somebody will use Stratum protocol or something like that, or use minerd. Like we've seen that one heavily in the field. And we actually set out a honeypot, and we have a link we can send out as well. But basically the talks about this honeypot was attacked constantly, and we wrote a rule on that. So here's an example where, hey, if I'm doing something with Nginx, for instance, and I go ahead and click on that, it's going to show me the rule sets. If you scroll down, like, okay, unexpected spawn process for Nginx, or what the unauthorized process by connection is. And it's all based on this rule, a description of said rule, what the condition would be. And those conditions are based on, again, that kernel, ptrace, kernel-based kind of probe that's ingesting all of this data that you can capture to a file, which is what we do with our Sysdig capture open source tool. And then Falco's doing is streaming that and then allowing you to do something like, get a notification or what have you. And then with our overall full Falco secure product, you can do things like have like an audit log of every command that was written and all those types of things. So you really have, a lot of, you have a lot of data that you could see versus running blind on, a GKE or EKS cluster, or even like you've homespun like a Kube ADM, a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And seeing some of these things here, especially with the syscalls that Falco watches for, actually, I've kind of gotten into this a little bit lately because I'm working with some folks upstream in Kubernetes to make seccomp profiles GA in Kubernetes. So, if you've ever written a deployment or a pod, you may have used the security context there. And seccomp profiles, for instance, essentially allow you to restrict or enable the ability or the use of system calls within a process. So whatever is running in that container. And one of the things that's really difficult about that is that you have to write these profiles that say, I'm allowing this container to use these syscalls and not use these other ones. And actually getting that list of syscalls is pretty difficult. But if you have something like Falco here that says, I want to be notified when these are used, then it allows you to understand exactly what is needed by the container and what is not, or what are some unexpected calls it's making. And in the context of writing seccomp profiles, for instance, for the nodes that your workloads are running on, this is going to be really useful to allow you to, get seccomp profiles out of that. And I'd even thought about, from a Falco perspective, if
we're actually doing that.
Yeah.
So like, and I don't want to speak, but I think there's been contributions. You can even go on this site. I think we're working on some seccomp integration, and that's another thing. If you all want to contribute, this isn't something where it's like, you can go to falco.org. We have a Slack channel. But I mean, use this product, like use this open source tool. It's very useful. It's, again, we have Helm charts for deploying. We have, systemd deployment. If you just want to do it in a standard host, we can install on Minikube, right? And we're doing something interesting, not only on the system call level too, but we can also interpret Kubernetes audit log stuff. So that could do something like, okay, so let's say Dan went ahead and created a namespace that was a disallowed namespace. You would get notified. So you can output that to, some type of downstream like SIM or elk stack or something like that. But I'm sorry to cut you off there, dude.
No worries. That's awesome. And we're working on a seccomp operator right now, and I'm getting all kinds of ideas about how you might analyze things with Falco and spit out some profiles and then use the seccomp operator to be able to schedule that onto nodes. All sorts of cool stuff there. So definitely we'll reach out. And I like to make a point of whenever I have someone on the show making some contributions to the open source project as well. So I really need to take a deeper dive here and see if I can create some integrations. But that's awesome to hear y'all are already working on that. Since we're already 15 minutes in, I want to go ahead and kick it over to you to talk a little bit more about Sysdig and how it builds on top of these great features that you mentioned about Falco.
I kind of want to actually show Falco in action, if that's, because I think we've talked a little bit about it, and then we can go, because it kind of sets the basis for what we would do with the security tool. So I'll go ahead and share here. So I have a Helm chart. Basically, I'm going to install. This is a cluster. It's a GKE cluster here. And shout out to Ahmet Al-Balkan about, I use Kubernetes and all that to be able to kind of see my, name my things that has something more elaborate than that. So you can see I have it. So I have if you look here, I just created a namespace called Falco. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and deploy the Falco tool. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and go Falco install, right? And if you look on the screen here, I'm deploying through this Helm chart, and then I'm setting, because this is an eBPF thing, we're actually going to use the kernel probe. And the other thing, I want to give a shout out to Leo Lorenzo. We built this thing that I think is really cool. It's this thing called driver kit. And what it is if you request, this is going to install, and let me go ahead and do this real quick. There we go. We're spinning it up. Okay. Ponds. So we see it's doing the container creation here. And okay, let's go back let's do this. So I know the second thing I said here is because of this is only on my local setup as a TTOI setup, because basically the streaming from the logs was happening a little bit slower than usual, and this is just this is my own thing. It's in my own environment, and so basically, just got to remember my syntax here. Oops. So now you can see basically what we're doing is compiling this eBPF probe. So going back to the whole build kit thing, if it's basically requesting at an endpoint for that kernel mod probe, this eBPF probe that gets created. So that's a tap into the kernel. So right now it's looking at this, is compiling the rules, it's creating the container, it's doing this, and it's going. So I'm going to go ahead and do get pods. It's running. And because I just applied that kubectl command, it's restarting the set to TTY. So basically, back to this build kit thing. Basically, what it's doing is it hits the endpoint. It says, if I don't have that kernel mod probe, it's actually going and trying to build it for a couple of distros that we have. But what's cool is you can then PR if you don't see the one you need, going to the site, and we'll compile it for you. And then from that point, we'll do all of the major builds going forward. Really cool. Again, if you go to Falco, the Git page, and you can see the build kit stuff they're doing, I was blown away when they showed it to us. And so, again, that's something you can see. So you can see now this is running. I'm going to go ahead and go back to tail these logs. So you can see it's going here and looking at this local rules file, and you can see it already seeing like a privileged container was started, right? Which is obviously the kube proxy. So it's already streaming, data of what's going on within your environment, which gives you visibility of what's going on. So let me go ahead and go into another. I'm going to try to not attack, but basically attack one of these pods. So, okay, cube, CTX. And you can see it's still streaming here. Falco. And you can see I'm in the Falco namespace on the Falco cluster. I'm going to go exec get pods. I'm going to exec into one of these pods because remember I told you one of the rules we have out of the box is somebody terminal shelling into a container or writing to a directory. So let's go ahead and show that. So I'm going to exec into Falco-Q blah. And I'm going to go bash. Hey, look what happened. You see here? It's showing me that I attached. So that was instantaneous at the speed of a system call. Again, very unique instrumentation point. Think about having to instrument these things and seeing that, and then basically going back and having this rule out of the box or creating your own rule sets based on, again, this data point, right? So I'm in on it. And then let's just say I'm in this container now and I want to do something bad. And I'm going to do fake exe. And look here. What happened? Nice. See, it's showing me exactly like what, like what was happening, which user did it. They touched, they did this command, right? So again, you can then take this data and stream it out and all of that fun stuff because you have outputs and all of that data. So if you think about it, this is where Falco sits. You have your own like outputs and responses, do it yourself. And again, we build this motivation here is, and we'll get to the right side of the screen. But basically, if you look here, you see like suspicious events, syscall level data that's brought in by the eBPF probe that I showed you when we did the deployment of those pods. It did that compilation. If it doesn't see it locally, it tries to go out to our endpoint and grab that eBPF probe. So you don't have to be in the business of trying to create that on your own. And if you do need it, you PR and we create it for you, right? So that's the whole logic behind it. And so that's Falco. And again, what's cool about it, going back here, these are all rule sets that you get out of the box, right? That's all that's built in here. You see these rule sets. And so what you can do is, if I see here, GKE, Crossplane, you can see there's a Falco extras. You can also like have custom rule sets. And so you can go here. We have a script here where I could take like, this rules to Helm and create this and then deploy updated rule sets on the fly for things that I wanted to do. So if I have, there's some we have out of the box that like, again, even go in that secure dev hub that we have. So if I have stuff for Mongo where I want to, update and create additional rule sets, I have that right there. So again, being able to like really extend this out and what have you, and that's kind of Falco. Do you want any, is there any questions or from anyone or?
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, so, and you probably have a lot more context on this than me, but the advantage of eBPF, if I understand correctly, is that you're able to do this from user space, right? So you're able to be able to run this on something like a hosted Kubernetes service like GKE, EKS, et cetera. Is that right?
Well, it's beyond that. So our kernel mod probe runs in that space anyway. So it's always running in user space. And so we have an article that talks about the intricate details of it. And I'll put that as we can add it to the liner notes here. It's pretty genius. But again, it's ptrace is the function you're thinking of that allows you to kind of tap into functions. And we're doing that to extrapolate even more data and like things like Fargate and all of those things, which we're, extending out. Because again, it's almost like Falco is the incubation part, like, or not even, well, I guess it's apropos, but basically it's where we kind of test everything before we put it in our secure environment. Cause obviously it's built on this whole kind of, Falco rules engine, right?
Right.
And so again, if you want to create your outputs and all the things, what Sysdig Secure provides you, and we can get into this as well, is basically provide you even more things like automatic remediation, compliance checks, machine learning profiling, detection rules, this UI that allows you to kind of take your Falco rules, apply them, and instead of having to restart your container, restart it with Falco, you have to restart after you do rules changes. It's doing it live. The agent's looking at it, sending this, bidirectional kind of data that's saying, okay, update these rule sets. So even if, for instance, the Sysdig backend, which can be SaaS, or you can deploy it within the four walls or your VPC, you can basically have it like, rule sets would always be applied on those local hosts, even if the backend's not even available. Mm-hmm. So there's also awesome. Like, again, yeah, it's really cool. And then also like we have native SIM integration. So syslog, Splunk, all those, you can send webhooks out to do things like, stop a container. I had a customer, I thought we actually demonstrate this, and shout out to the folks from Glue. where we had a Falco rule trigger where somebody went into a pod. We had it trigger a webhook to their product that then moved it over to a canary. So their services, because they do a service mesh tool, so they have a canary that basically did moved it to a canary service, so nobody could access it. So you can almost quarantine it that way. So this is really cool stuff that you can do with it. And then obviously the thing is incident response. So what I can do is we can install the agent, I think, so you guys can see the difference, and then I can show you in our UI as well. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you want me to go ahead and kick off those cluster creation before we get into that, and then we can circle back?
Yeah,
Cool.
and I can install it right now, just while you're doing that on the test cluster that we use. And so, just to kind of give you guys background, I'll give you all background. Dan and I have had an awesome week together. I'm telling you, it's been a lot of fun. And so like we were like, what are we gonna do here? And it was kind of like Lennon and McCartney, or what's a better analogy? Like what's a new analogy here? I don't even know, but basically like we kind of clued off of each other, and he's like, look, I can do this with Crossplane. I'm like, I can do this with Sysdig. And so we were like, okay, let's figure out how we can do it. The idea here is he's going to deploy a couple clusters to each, which I love. And I was testing, and this whole provider concept of Crossplane is freaking awesome. It's like,
hey, it works.
it was great. It was like you click. He's like, I was like, dude, I need a cluster. Boom. It's like a GKE was right up. And also EKS. You all know how difficult it is to plan out your VPCs, your, all of those, the minutia. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, I got it. Here's what it looks like. And so he deploys this, and then we install the agent on top of it. And it's like, okay, it's all hunky dory.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. Well, I want to walk through that just a little bit. So
I'll stop share.
Sounds good. And I'll go ahead and share my screen, and all of these manifests I'm using are in the TBS repo. Per usual, so y'all can go over and take a look at it yourselves. But as Pop mentioned there, we have a shared cluster right now. So there's a GKE cluster running that we have Crossplane installed in, and we also have provider GCP and provider AWS installed. So if I go ahead and look at the pods in this cluster, we should be able to see, yep, we have Crossplane running there, provider AWS and provider GCP. So when those are installed, they bring their controllers, which help us provision things on those cloud providers. But they also bring all the CRDs that represent the different managed resources. So all the services, all the mini services on GCP and AWS. So if we, for instance, get the CRDs, and let's just look at GCP ones, you'll see things like node pools, things like a network, global address, Cloud SQL instance, cloud memory store, et cetera. These are all types that are now available to us. And that's really great that now you can create YAML manifests and apply them in Kubernetes, and it'll go provision those resources. But a lot of times you want some sort of abstraction or composition on top of that. And you want to be able to, especially in an organization as a platform team, you want someone to be able to spin up a new GK cluster, create a database securely with some sane defaults, and only expose the level of configuration you want. So today, we are going to expose actually very, very little configuration. And you can do this all without writing any code. It's just with creating new manifests. So if we look at our new type here, I'm saying we're in the #Dan org here. So you can imagine this is your organization. And we're just defining a Kubernetes cluster type. And all we want to expose on that, so all we want configurable for developers in our organization, is the number of nodes they want, and then the provider ref, which basically says use these credentials to provision this. And then we're going to create some compositions, which basically say, I will satisfy a request for a cluster with these things on this provider. So let's look at GKE first, because it's a little bit more simple. You'll see that in GKE, if we want to create a publicly available cluster, all we need is a GKE cluster and a node pool. So that's pretty simple. GKE kind of makes Kubernetes provisioning more of an abstract thing, right? You don't have to worry about as many moving pieces. You can also get more complex. There's, about 100 fields on each of these resources that you could configure to put it in a specific VPC. We're keeping it a little more simple today. But you'll see that in GCP on the node pool, we have this initial node count field. So that's what they say is, this is how many nodes you want in this node pool that I'm provisioning. And we're saying from that abstraction, which is the cluster type. So from the cluster, I want to take the spec.nodes field and replace the initial node count here. And if that's not provided, I just won't replace the node count, but we're going to provide it here. On EKS, you need things like IAM roles created and policy attachments where these aren't automatically created for you. So you'll see we have a number of different resources here from an AWS perspective that we want to create, specifically these different policies that are needed by the cluster itself. And then you'll see the node group itself. And here you'll see that you configure the number of nodes with this desired size here. And once again, we're passing from the cluster type to the desired size. So let's go ahead and get this started, so we can shift it back to Pop to actually show us some of the Sysdig stuff. So first, what I'm going to be able to do is create the roles that are needed by Crossplane to manage the new types we're going to create. So you'll see that we're creating one for this clusters. And then we're going to create the infrastructure definition, which is saying, I want you to create a new CRD in my cluster that allows me to provision these cluster types. So if we actually create the definitions here, we should see that there's now a CRD that exists. Oops. I think we're going to want to say kube control there. And let's say we want just #dan things. And you'll see that we now have this type here and it has the fields we configured. And then now we need to be able to create those compositions. So you can have kind of infinitely many compositions that can satisfy this type. As a platform operator, you may want this across clouds. You may want different configurations for the same cloud. Today, we're just showing GKE and EKS. So I'm going to go ahead and create both of those compositions. And then now that those are there, as a developer or someone else in the organization who's not on the platform team, all I need to do is specify the number of nodes, and then I can optionally have a composition selector that's going to use labels on these compositions, which could be, a publicly defined schema in your organization. Here, we're just using the provider name. So if we scroll back up, you'll see provider AWS. So I can select that one specifically. When you're creating compositions, you can also, or definitions, excuse me, you can also specify a default composition or enforce a composition to make these specific ones always satisfy. Here, we're letting the developer choose, and we're also letting them pick the nodes. So this one is going to be scheduled to the EKS composition, and this one will be scheduled to the GKE composition. So obviously Kubernetes clusters take a little bit to spin up. So I'm going to go ahead and create both of these. You'll see here cluster 1.
And I was blown away by this. This is the money right here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I be fanboy on this one? I was like, look, he's doing this. It's like, you know how hard it is? It's like, look, you can use tools like EKS, ETL. You can use like, Terraform or whatever. But it's using the language of kubectl, the primitives, all of that.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other tool that's doing it is this good.
Yeah.
Am I hyping this too much, Dan? But I was so pumped this week using it, dude.
No, we'll take all the hype. And I especially want to shout out 2 engineers on my team, Nick Cope, who's kind of our tech lead, as well as Muvafak Onis, who was on last week or 2 weeks ago on TBS, who really were the masterminds behind this composition model. And they did great work here, and we're continuing to build out the functionality. But I just want to show that you'll see that all of these AWS resources were created, and they're going to begin spinning up here. And then let's look at all the GCP resources that exist. We should see everything in our composition there was spit out. So you'll see the GKE cluster and its provisioning, and then the node pool, which will start provisioning once that cluster is available. So while that's happening, which is going to take some time, especially on AWS, I'm going to hand it back over to Pop to walk us through a little bit of what the Sysdig product will do for us.
All righty. And here's what we're going to do. So first thing we're going to do here is I have, and this is our SaaS deployment, which with you all, it's a trial you can sign up for. If you go to sysdig.com right now, we do. And then what's cool about Sysdig as well, we have an amazing blog. We send out a newsletter on a monthly. That's awesome. So it's, it's not so much at all marketing material. There's useful blogs about troubleshooting, securing, those types of things. So go to sysdig.com right now if you can. There's a resources page with blogs and webinars, and we've done a bunch of them. I mean, we've done some on like pipeline security, interacting with Prometheus, and building exporters. I mean, we have a something called a Prometheus Promcat IO. So there's basically curated versions of the exporters that you see out there. So you don't have to put I don't know, some type of rogue exporter out there. So here's what I'm going to do. And once you get started here, you can see we have our secure product, but basically we call it our platform, and it's a secure DevOps platform. And so we have these two functions. We allow you kind of a workflow of, security, and not just like, container security, but also host level security and all those things. So tying in all those functionalities. So again, using Falco as the basis for the runtime capability, but we also have like vulnerability management, machine learning, and all of those things. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to install the agent right now. And again, don't worry about this access key. If you all are seeing this in the future, this is going away, so you won't be able to use this. But this is, this is the keys to the castle. So I'm going to call this thing, this cluster that we have is the one that Dan used to do the provisioning on. Let's go see let's go see what's going on. So by installing the agent on. So we're going to go ahead and go into our deployment. You can see we have Crossplane on it. These are the namespaces that we have. I'm going to do this curl script, and boom, password. So what this is doing is this is downloading our manifests, right? It's creating the cluster roles that we need for the product to work. And you can see it detected, right? The eBPF probe, right? And it's deploying the agent. So now let's go ahead and do, let me just do a kubeNS. And again, shout out to Amit, get pods. And we can see the agents are running. Let me just go ahead and just see what's going on here. 56.4. Yep, and we can see data is getting over there. So let's go to our monitoring product and show what's going on. No data, it might take a second. Come on, let me do a refresh. There we go. Oops, still getting data. See, there's our host there, right? So we got our data here. And it's also, as you can see here, we're also getting, all we've done is installed the agent. You all saw nothing up my sleeve. There's no pre-work here, right? And basically you can see we're getting all of the metadata, right? So we're seeing these are deployments, and we see that's our Crossplane our Crossplane cluster name. And then we're getting things like, okay, let's look at this and see like our cluster overview. So if we look at this, we can see, our availability, so we can understand our pod's health. We can see that just spun up. And if I go ahead and like highlight over this yellow blip here, it shows that connectivity started up. It shows what the source IP is and all of this data. So again, security isn't just prevention. It's also visibility, right? So understanding what these things can do. So if I want to understand, for instance, this namespace and look at what my memory allocation is, I can go ahead and do this, right? So I look at this, I can see these are pods available. And you notice that just spun up. It showed at the time frame that we just did it, right? Because we just installed the agent. It's showing the deployment state. It's showing the CPU cores versus the reserve. So again, and this is, look, you can deploy with the amazing product called Crossplane to multiple clouds, right? Are you spending your money properly? What does that mean? Is like, do I really need an extra large instance when I'm only using one core for this application? So understanding what your what your cluster's utilization is so key. And the other part of this too, and again, all of these dashboards are out of the box. We integrate with Prometheus too. So if you're exposing your metrics, be it Prometheus, StatsD, or JMX, we automatically pick up all of it, right? And so what I can do with this is, even there's an application level detail. So like things like HTTP requests and all of that, but I can also kind of look at this and see my network traffic. So I can see this detail, and this is like a visual representation. So Crossplane right now is connecting out to these external addresses, this 173 address. These are probably AWS. So this is showing you in real time what this thing is connecting out to create. Look, you see there's another endpoint, I bet, on the AWS side that's doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So none of this, why is this thing connecting out? What is this thing doing, right? So that's the visibility, the monitoring piece. And again, all of you installed, this is one agent. Let's move over to the security piece. So here's secure. And I'm going to go from the top down. So here's an overview. So I could see, for instance, if there's CVEs for these specific environments. This is our new overview page. So we can see if there's images scanned. This is a workflow that basically can talk to you about like, what's going on in your environment. Is there images that like, that are protected? So if you like from the vulnerability management, it's super useful for you to look at this and also look at benchmarks. And we can talk about that, where our agent does like a CIS benchmark on all the other things. So if you're deploying and you want to keep a steady state across your environment, you're using Crossplane to deploy to, EKS and GKE, and you want to ensure like a compatible, control plane that's there, you can do that. Then we can look at this at the events level. See, there's no events, right? Well, because here's these policies that we have. And again, you see these are all using the same lists, macros, and rules editor here, right? So you have this, you have this ability to do it manually, right? Or you can do something like this where I could look at these runtime policies and I could see I have, these are the ones I've enabled, like, and we can also do Kubernetes audit integration. I haven't enabled it here, but we can do that as well. But let's go ahead and look at some suspicious activity, right? So file system reads and all of that. So here, or like with crypto mining. So you have this, this ability, but what you can do with this as well is you can basically have it kill the container if it sees something like this, stop the container or pause it, or create a capture. If you all are familiar with Wireshark, again, talking about our pedigree, it is a capture of every single system call that happened when this policy was violated. So let's go ahead. Yeah, it's this again. This is what really, that's what I'm at Sysdig 4 years, and every single time it's like I love this workflow. So let's go ahead and let's try to trigger an event, just like we did on the Falco side. So I'm going to just try to exec into the Sysdig container. And I'm going to do a bash. Oh, okay. Why is that? Oh, yeah, because I didn't put the pod name in right. I'm just going to go into that one. All right. And I'm going to go to, I'm going to touch that file again. Etsy. Oh, not Etsy. I'm going to do bin fake exe here. And do it by, there we go. So you see here, I went into the event. It showed me immediately this thing happened. I triggered the event here. It showed me that this is the container it was on, but all of that context. Now think about this again. I've deployed with Crossplane to bunch of clusters. And this is my needle in the haystack. I'm trying to figure out these rule sets. What's great about these rule sets as well is I can take these policies and I can just do them, using that metadata that we picked up. I can just do it to a specific cluster name if I wanted to, or I can do it throughout my estate, right? So this is picking up, if I can spell cluster right, that'd be awesome. Just say namespace here, and that should be easier. Yep. I can go, okay, I just want to have this be deployed to this. So I can kind of limit this. So this is a much more granular control of what's going on versus having you have to create rule sets on your own. Again, using that basis of Falco to be able to do it. The other thing is we're also going to show you the events that are going on. So if I go bring this back to an hour, let's just say, or 10 minutes here. So this was a day ago. So here, I can look at this and say, okay, I touched this file name or whatever. So this is going to show you like what exactly happened at that given point in time, right? So I can know exactly what's going on in all this level of detail. And then the last thing, again, where we add even more value is like being able to then look at this cluster and be able to look at images and see like where images are if there's things that need, to be that have to be evaluated. So we can look at this and do like a scan for vulnerabilities. That's kind of the idea what we can do here. It's very simple kind of a function for like having a full, if you look at this tree, we're able to do a ton of this remediation steps. MITRE framework's already there. SIM integration. Let me show you that real quick. Oops, no, that's not it, but that's a good picture. That's CK who's talking about basically he's one of our he's our lead of SEs in EMEA. So if you look here, we could take our events and forward them to things like Splunk or PagerDuty, or if you're using like a downstream SIM like an IBM MCM or QRadar. So you can create this integration and say, okay, I'm going to take all this data now and send it out, or syslog out to something, right? And then use this as almost a data science tool, because you can think of that granular level, instrumentation point that we have. So you have that integration. And the other thing we do, again, we do pod security policies as well. So you can simulate, if I try to put these pod security policies in place, right? I can import a pod security policy. And if I try to apply this to Crossplane namespace, what is it going to break? It'll show you, it'll do a simulation of it.
Right.
Really cool stuff. And lastly, you can also do things like reports. So you can create this and say, okay, where am I vulnerable, right? So if I look at here, I can say OS level vulnerability, run this across my estate or a specific set of hosts. So this is, the money here. So I could look at this and say, okay, this is the CVE here. And also, by the way, this integrates with things like Jenkins or because we have basically an inline scanner, so you can do pipeline scanning as well. So again, every aspect of it from build all the way to postmortem, like I showed you all the audit log and you can do captures and all that data. You have one agent is doing all the stuff I just showed you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like the amount of features that you're showing off here, it's hard to even fit into a single show, I think. So yeah, that's super cool. I particularly, even like back to the monitor part of it, it was pretty cool to see all those requests going out to the different cloud providers. You can see, because each provider runs as its own pod, you can really narrow that down, right? And see where is it making requests. And specifically, you could see, let's say you have a resource that's misconfigured, so it's causing like continual update and failing. You could see that kind of, memory usage and that sort of thing. And seeing that it's making calls more frequently than you'd expect. So lots of cool stuff there. And another thing, it's really important to have, make sure your cluster is secure where Crossplane is running, because if someone's able to get control of this, right, this is able to go out and create infrastructure on your behalf. So if someone's able to, maybe like exec into one of these containers or something like that, there's potential that it could have some really harmful effects. So really cool to see all the different features you can evaluate here. And wow, that zoom down view there is crazy.
So again, think about it. You just asked and said, look, we went to the left here. You said, here's my provider. And my provider's sending it out to these EC2 hosts that's doing that. And again, if we had it instrumented on the other side, basically we could get this. I don't have integration, right? We tap into CloudWatch metrics. So we can actually ingest what that tag would have been that you've created. Right. So it's like, if it's a CloudFormation tag or whatever you're using. So this is what, whenever I show people, I always get this.
Yeah.
And again, in terms of utilization, I always get the same question, you all. It's like, okay, this does a lot of stuff. It's going to kill my cluster, right? It's going to use a lot of utilization. I go, look, at peak, we're from 0.02% to like 2 to 3% of total CPU. But think about what you're getting. You're getting monitoring, you're getting vulnerability scanning, you're getting, post-mortem capability, you're having captures. I mean, you have all of that capability, like all through one box, all through one agent and one backend.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is crazy. This is awesome. Do you want to, it looks like, well, let me check here and see. It looks like both our clusters are ready now. Do you want to pull those cube configs on your end and take a look at it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we both have access to this control cluster here, as you've seen, and so I provisioned these clusters on this on our control cluster, and so now Pop should be able to go in here at the command line if you want to share your screen, and pull those cube configs out of the connection secrets, and then he's gonna install the agent on these. So you can actually see there that cluster 2 there is the GKE cluster we spun up, and well, you could actually even just from the control cluster command line pull that cube config off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, with those commands.
Yeah. I have to look at that. Yeah, hold on.
Let me send those over. These are also on the guide. If any folks at home want to run this, so I'll drop this over to you in Slack, Pop.
Yep, you got it.
All right. There you go.
Let me just stop share real quick, because there might be some sensitive stuff there.
Right. Fair enough.
Yep. And also, I don't know if you've experienced this. Notifications have been re-enabled for some reason. So I was getting all types of other notifications. So I had to stop Slack real quick. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yep. All right. So I'm in the Crossplane container or cluster. I'm just grabbing those right now. And I had to do something funky. And it was funny that Dan and I were talking about this earlier. Here's $1 million idea for everybody out there. If there's something that could actually corral like cube configs, I think that's $1 million idea. And if anybody knows anything, please chime in, because we were like, there's obviously you can do things like kubectx and stuff like that, but it's just managing like multiple, let's say you have like, especially with like Crossplane, if you're deploying like multiple clusters, it's so hard to kind of manage that. So I'm going to do it a hacky way. I'm going to remove the config and rename each one of these configs to .cube/config. It's not best practice, but we're just, we know better is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to share your screen again here?
Just still grabbing the second file.
Okay, cool.
Saying secrets could not be found for some reason.
Let's see. Are you in the control cluster?
I am.
And you should be fine to.
Oh, wait a second. Do I have to be in the namespace? That's why. I got it.
It's in default namespace.
Oh, it is. Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Let's see. And you should be fine to show this if you want, because this will just pipe these out to files if you want.
Okay. Yep.
So let's see.
All right. We grab the GKE config.
Yeah.
All right, we got that. All right. So again, hacky way of doing this. I don't typically do this. So
yeah, and this is, we were having some issues with the bash script that's running. We're not exactly sure why. It was circumnavigating whatever our cube config if we set the variable or specified a flag or something like that. So not exactly sure what's happening, but as Pop said, this will work for us. So we'll optimize on working here.
Export cube config equals config. All right, so now we see it's the cluster that we have. Let's get in as cool. All right, there's that. All right, now.
Yeah, so Pop is now looking in the cluster that we provisioned from Crossplane, and he pulled that cube config out of the connection secret in the control cluster, and is now accessing the remote cluster. And now
I love the play. I love the play-by-play. This is great.
Yeah. We need to just turn off the video and just have us do straight audio of you doing things on the command line. I wonder if anyone would listen.
It'd be great. Oh, look, he just did that. Oh.
Container one creating, container two creating.
All right, so we see a Sysdig agent is getting created here. Hold on. We're gonna go to kubeNS, Sysdig agent. Okay, get pods. And I have an alias for kubectl, so
you could probably assume that the cube control was alias to K here.
Yep. So let's just do this. We'll watch.
I think, and you mentioned this too, Pop.
See, I'm not just a pretty face. I don't just do interviews. All right. I can get deep. I can get deep with cube.
Right. Well, we were talking before about the I don't use any of the shortcuts or anything. Like I'm full cube control, whatever, the most verbose thing possible, which of course is not great efficiency. It is nice in the demos though, for if, it's a little bit easier to follow, and for the docs that I write, it's like, no matter how you have it configured, it's going to work for you. But it definitely can get a little bit verbose seeing me type cube control 100 times in one of these streams.
So the pods are running. Let me just go ahead and do a logs-f for one of them, because sometimes, like I said, it might take a second. There we go. All right. So it's adding these metrics, but there we go. It's NA, because again, it's still, bringing in there, but it's very quick. Here, let's do this. There we go.
Nice.
There's our GK8 cluster. And again, I can go ahead and, I can show you what we all did before, where I could, do the whole try to exec into one of the containers, because again, we've done this policy throughout versus defining it or whatever. Or if we even wanted to set up alerts, that's the other part of this as well, is you get all these out of the box alerts. So if we want to give an example, and by the way, we have a really good document. It's one of our most researched one on a pod crashing. So if a pod's crashing, you can create a capture or send the notification out to PagerDuty, Slack, all of these things. Capture that literally will tell you it's a postmortem. What are you going to do? Do an S trace or D trace after the fact when a pod's crashed, versus enabling this, having a capture that I can go in and figure out what process caused the pod to crash. So a postmortem. No other tool on the market can do that.
Yeah.
APM, again, APMs are doing more of your tracing function. We're doing more of just giving you a confidence level of what's going on with your containers, and also from a security perspective. So, and monitoring capability. So now we have that. Let's try the EKS cluster, but you can see now it's showing up. And again, did I have to do anything? Did I have to add any tags or anything? No, it's all there for you. This is the magic of Sysdig. This is why I love this company and I love this product.
Yes. And one of the things I'm thinking about as you're doing this is think about if you just had a job in your, or maybe a deployment in your Kubernetes cluster that watched for creation of clusters and just automatically installed the Sysdig agent, right? Like every time you spun up a cluster from the control cluster, it just automatically did that, and you just see them pop up, in your console here, and be able to see all the metrics and something. So let's say you have like a big organization that has 50 Kubernetes clusters, and you just automatically, when you provision new clusters, you're guaranteed to get that Sysdig agent in there and see what you got, which is pretty awesome.
That's a big, like we have a large customer that has baked our image into their AMI, for instance, or again, they have daemon sets that are like they're using like Terraform or something like that, or had they had Crossplane, they would like be able to embed our agent in there as well.
Right.
So okay, what did I do wrong here? Let me go to cube config, copy dash EKS.cube to config. Again, hacky, everyone. Don't don't do this at home.
And we might see here if that secret has gotten old, because we were talking about, so EKS actually refreshes their token every 5 minutes, which is good, right? But it's annoying if you're pulling it off and doing it manually like this, because that can change. So,
all right, so I guess I got to run this again, and I'll just do it into this secret. There we go. Could I just do something like this and just have it output to config?
Oh yeah, you can make it go wherever you want.
Oh, well, no, here's the reason. That's not good. Yeah, I have to export the config. That's why.
Let's see. So yeah, you need to be connected up to the control cluster here.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I lost my config, so I gotta do this.
You could pull it down from the console again if you wanted to, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
GK one.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I want to one time just do like an experiment of spinning up a new cluster, installing Crossplane into it, and like seeing how deep we can go, because like every time you spin up a new cluster, if you put Crossplane in it, you could then spin up clusters from there. You get some pretty wild cluster trees happening.
Why is that not working? Let me just try this. This usually is the fix, is to close the terminal and just go back.
Oh yeah. Had you exec into one of the pods, or were you were outside? Okay, you look good.
Yeah. All right, so let me just connect. Right. This should create a new. Let me look. There we go.
Nice.
All right. Cool. And again, saving grace here is doing. If you all haven't done this, you might have done this. Is QPS-1 is a tool with ZSH for Z. I use ZSH. I don't know, it's just easy for me to kind of understand where I'm at. So if I do something like this, you can see it's here, and I can do something like rename it like I did in the past. All right, so yeah. All right, this should be what?
Yeah.
Shit. We don't want to replace, I know why. We don't want to replace it. We want to get it and then rename it after the fact. That's probably what it is. Again, hacky. All right, there we go. All right.
And just try like get secrets here, and let's make sure that we're in the right spot.
All right, cool. There it is. All right, nice. Cool. All right. So instead of naming, I'm just going to go back to the defaults and just grab it and then move it. So just go here. Let me just call it EKS.
All right. Looks like it's working there for you.
Yep. All right, there we go. Cool. Now we're in that cluster. Let's do a get nodes. All right, perfect. Knowing by our AWS names, we should be good to go. Let's try and install the agent. Let's go back there. And again, there's our GK cluster. Now we're going to install the agent. And again, I think I glanced over this, but yeah, you can use Kubernetes. We have Helm charts as well, right? We also can do this via Docker. So if you have a standalone host, look at so left side Kubernetes Helm, right side Docker and Linux. So if you have a standalone host, you can do a Docker run or even run us as a system MD or like a process that runs on the host, which is cool. So you don't, if you're legacy and you want to install it, what you saw with Falco, with Sysdig Secure, you can do that as well. We have a lot of customers doing that as well. So EKS Crossplane 1 is the name we're going to use. I'm going to copy this here. I'm going in and boom. What are we doing? We're downloading the manifest. We're creating the namespace. We're creating the roles. We're doing all the fun stuff for you. You don't have to do any of this.
Awesome.
Pods, oops, cube NS, Sysdig, agent, K, get pods. All right.
Here we go.
Yep. I think we're going to need some music or you to talk more about Crossplane while this is happening. Does that sound good?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk more about it. I mean, like it's pretty sweet that, you're kind of able. So let's say Pop is like the head of the platform team at our org. We'll call it dananddan.org. And
I like that.
Yeah, I know. We should actually start something on the side here.
It's good.
But let's say we have, 100 developers in our organization, and we want to be able to have all of these different configurations, maybe across clouds, maybe, within a single cloud in different projects or, with different configurations. And we're just able to create all the different kind of like abstractions that we want. So one of the things that we say a lot of time is like, build your own Heroku, right? So when you go to Heroku, they've got kind of all of this pre-canned infrastructure for you. So a way for you to deploy your actual application, but also, to say something simple, like give me a large database. And you don't really have to worry about if that's a database that's an RDS instance on AWS or a Cloud SQL instance on GCP or the exact configuration to make that wired up to your application. And that's kind of the same thing you get here, but you're defining your level of complexity. So in this case, we wanted to say you only get to control the number of nodes. So basically the size of your cluster, but maybe we also want to say, you get to determine the machine size. And we could even have a mapping of like large, small, and medium, where we have a field on the cluster type that says, you can either have large, small, or medium here. And on GKE, that's going to map to, like N1 standard 1, N1 standard 2, N1 standard 4, etc. And on AWS, that's going to map to like T2 medium, something like that. So you can really define these own abstractions, which is really cool. And the second part of that is, since these are all Kubernetes manifests, these are pushed to a Git repo. So I can define my entire platform. Let's say I define my own Heroku for my organization. I could publish that. I can make it open source. And I've essentially now published my internal platform. And so you can imagine like a world in which you have companies that are saying, like, we're going to open source this part of our platform. This is what we use for, our e-commerce thing. And then other folks are going to be able to go in there and say, I want to build an e-commerce site. I'm going to use, Shopify's public platform that they put here, which may be like, a subset of what they actually do. So I'm really excited about this ability to be able to kind of like define your new types and make those available to other folks.
It again, really great tool. And again, it's using those Kubernetes primitives and all that, which is really cool. So you can just like do a kubectl like we did. We got the connections data and it was like, all right, awesome. And then we were able to get going. And again, I think we've honestly yes, we talked all week through Slack, but I think honestly, we spent maybe an hour on the phone together, like in terms of like just getting this stuff together. So by the way, now you can see that EKS cluster up. I want to kind of talk about this. We glanced over this, but the other thing we do is we have this RBAC function. It's like multi-tenancy aspect. We call it teams. And this works on our security product as well as our monitoring product. What I can do with this is I can say, okay, let's say Dan here is, let me just create this here. And I want to say cluster name. He's responsible for that EKS cluster. Right. And I want to sign the user. Let me see. I think Dan outbound. Oops, let me create again. let me call it something. I'm going to call it EKS team, cluster team. And so, this could be the default team. You can even have an entry point where you just maybe just want to show them like the overall dashboards or, that type of thing. And let me just do this. I think I have to be the super user to do this. That's the reason why it's not working. But the whole idea is I think I have to be you to do it, Dan. So I think we might have to do it from your side. But basically, I can create this now. And if I look here, I would have this view of just the EKS cluster, just that person seeing that. So I kind of piggybacked on Dan's account. So it's usually because he's the super admin. So that shows like we have user auth stuff. So like if somebody shouldn't be creating stuff, they shouldn't be creating it. Anyway, so that's basically the gist of our back. And maybe if you can share your screen, I can walk you through it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. Let me pop this over here real quick so we can make sure we get it going. All right. And I'll share real quick. All right. Okay, so I'm on monitor here. You said go to settings. Is that right?
Yep.
Cool.
Then go to teams.
Okay.
Click add team. Let's just call it EKS. And then where it's scoped by, do a container.
Okay.
Yep. And then type namespace or cluster dot name. Because again, you see, by the way, that list is all the metadata that we're picking up. So you can do some really fun stuff with all of that. So, yep. Cluster name is, let's just call it EKS Crossplane 1. Yep.
Nice. All right.
And assign user. Just type Dan. Let's see what happens there.
Let's see.
Yeah, it might be pop.
Looks like it's.
Oh, I think with trials, yeah, I think I know why.
Oh, right.
A lot of I do teams, so I apologize about that. But basically,
No
the
worries.
idea here is like I would then be able to have RBAC function for somebody to just see the things that are pertinent to them. But
Right.
that's the idea here. Is the gist of it is like again, this is really robust capability. You have scale. I mean, you could add thousands of clusters. We have a very large investment bank that has, I don't know, 150 to 200,000, if not 300,000 hosts that are being monitored by our tool.
Oh my gosh.
No.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Wow.
And securing it as well.
That's awesome. Well, I think there is a multitude of features here that we probably didn't even get to explore fully. So we might have to have you back on again and look at this some more. But this has definitely been a great show. We're pretty much at our time limit here. I wanted to just kind of like give you the floor to, if there's anything you want to chat about, whether it be the future of Sysdig, whether it be about the POPCAST, whether it just be about the general cloud native community, just anything you want to share you're working on or you're excited about or things you see coming in the next few months or years.
We're constantly improving our UI and listening to customers. And what I always tell customers or prospects is you don't just buy the product, you buy the company, right? And so we're growing with the company in terms of or we're growing with our community in terms of folks that understand it, that want to build out things. And also Falco, I would implore you all, take a look and try to contribute. There's things like I said, Dan was talking about some things he wants to do with SecComp. I mean, that'd be awesome just to have you all, because then again, it makes a stronger, more robust thing. And at the end of the day, from a community perspective, getting this thing, it's an incubated project, but getting it to a graduated project where it is kind of the thing. In terms of the POPCAST, we have a ton going on. I've got a bunch of things lined up, but we have some really good episodes in the past. We're at 22 episodes at this point. Again, the links are in the bottom there. Check us out, subscribe. And also what's cool about us is we also prescribe to like a GitOps type of thing. So basically, like if you want to have a specific guest or have questions for a guest, you can actually do a PR and do it and like ask those questions. But again, I'm just proud of the company at the Sysdig side, and I'm really happy about what we're doing on the podcast. In terms of the community, I mean, again, I totally echo what you say. It's like we need to be intrusive of everybody that's coming in, regardless of color, because of gender, because of sexual orientation, all of those things. And that's what I love about this community. There was places in the past that I worked that was just like, oh, everyone's kind of standoffish. But when I joined this community, what I love about it is the fact that everybody wants to help everybody succeed. And like, we need to perpetuate that. We need to carry that torch forward. Anybody coming in, help them understand what's going on. Help them get involved, help contribute, help doing what Dan's doing here with TBS, what Crossplane is doing, helping to get those things out there. And it's been a pleasure working with you this week, man. It's just been phenomenal. I love your product, and I think you guys do amazing things.
Definitely. Well, we certainly appreciate that, and I could not agree more. And to me, like, I was thinking about this weekend, I was writing some KubeCon proposals for talks and that sort of thing, and I found myself kind of like getting in a mindset of like, oh, I really want mine to get accepted, right? Which is completely normal. But one thing that I really like about the cloud native community is it seems that folks have a mindset of abundance rather than a mindset of scarcity, right? So they're not saying I need to like keep this knowledge for myself. It's saying the more I share this with others, the more I help others learn, the more I help others level up, and in turn they help me do the same. The better off this community is going to be, and especially doing that in an inclusive manner, right? So that all folks are able to be involved in that and not doing any sort of gatekeeping. So I would echo the same thing back to you. I think your podcast does a great job of opening doors for folks, of hearing new things, of learning and that sort of thing. And when you have that mindset, you don't really have to have that fear of failure, right? Because you're saying, you know what, my failures are learnings for others, and they're learnings for myself as well. So it's definitely just kind of like a freedom that this community gives to folks. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of. And it was definitely a pleasure to have you on today.
Same here. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. All right. Well, everyone on the stream, y'all have a good long weekend, maybe, or just a normal weekend if you're not in the US. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, folks.